Good morning, everybody. This is going to be chapter 16 of An Esoteric Cosmology by Rudolf Steiner. rsarchive.org is the website that I'm using for these readings. And, so real quick, apologize, I didn't get to another chapter like I had said previously. Keep getting sidetracked here. I need to stop over-promising and under-delivering here, but we'll get that issue taken care of. I'm glad to see that there's some people in the comment section liking the videos, and I'm getting some feedback on that, so that's cool. Man, I would like to structure this in a way where I can, I really want to structure it in a way where people will take the most away from it. So I want to, if I'm covering stuff that you already know, I apologize, but I want to make this very beginner friendly, because that's what I was hoping for when I first got into this. I've been studying this stuff now for 13, 14 years straight. I've read tons of books on the subject and put a lot of pieces together in my head, but I wished when I was starting there was someone who kind of broke it down, because you end up doing a lot of this work inside your head, and it can take months, it can take years until a certain piece gets put into place for you. At least that's how it was with me, because you're going to find books. Esoteric philosophy is so in depth. The breadth of information is just astounding. I mean, you could jump in with both feet today and you'll never even really scratch the tip of the iceberg of what's all there in your entire life. You can make some good headway with it, but I mean, this whole philosophy, I mean, it's just deep. It goes deep. So that's my goal, is I want to make it more accessible. I want to break it down into terms where people can really understand the entire philosophy. Because like I was saying before, you'll get a book on, let's say, the spiritual interpretation of esoteric symbolism, spiritual interpretation of the Bible, or you might get a book with the astrological interpretation of the Bible, or the physiological interpretation of the Bible. See, this is stuff here that when I was first starting out, I'd read a book on the astronomical interpretation of the Bible, and it was fascinating, and I could see how these specific things correlated. But then I'd hear a lecture on the physiological understanding of the Bible, and I'm like, for the longest time, I'm like, well, they can't both be true, right? I mean, but they are both true, and that's an intricate part of this philosophy, is that each scripture that you read, each piece of scripture was intended to be understood on several different levels of understanding. They're analogies. So when you've got, say for instance, you're talking about Saturn and what it represents, well, you're going to have 7 different analogous understandings of what Saturn is. You're going to have your cosmological evolution, where we talked about Saturn being the very first state of Earth evolution. I mean, we're talking back when you couldn't even see Earth. We're talking about the first swirlings of something happening. But there's also a psychological significance to the concept of Saturn, a physiological significance to the concept of Saturn, a societal aspect to it, a historical aspect, and it all fits together like a piece of the puzzle. One thing about any concept, say you're talking about the Saturn, the sun, or the moon periods, each one of those has its own particular manifestation in nature, in the mind, in the body, right? So there's all these analogous levels of interpretation for any one concept. So going back to like when you're like, or at least for me, when I was like, man, this can't all be true. I mean, which one is it? This guy's writing a book about the astrological interpretation of the Bible. And then I'm picking up a book that tells me it means something totally different, the physiological or the psychological interpretation of the Bible. That just kind of threw me off when I was first starting, because I was like, man, I mean, it sounds cool and everything, but how do you know which one's true? Well, once you really get deep into this, you see that for every one archetype, there are many different applications, but they're all analogies of one another. So that's important to know. And as we progress here, I'm going to get into more of those types of breakdowns. I really want to make this very accessible for people and break down those understandings, because there's so many layers of it. Just because I'm covering one layer, or I may speak of only one layer of it when I give any particular talk on it, doesn't mean that there's not more layers that you can peel back. I mean, it's difficult to lay out all the layers. That's why you won't really find books. I've found a few of them, but you really won't, in general, find books that cover the entire thing. You might find a book on a specific piece of this philosophy, and then you'll have to find another book and read about another specific piece. It's a gigantic puzzle that we're putting together here. I liken it to those 3D pictures. I'm sure everybody's seen them, the Magic Eye posters. Well, that's kind of what this philosophy is like. At first, you just think you're looking at nothing. You're just like, okay, it's a bunch of colors, a bunch of blobs on a piece of paper, means nothing. Until somebody was like, no, there's something in that. I can see something in that. And then you think they're crazy because you haven't seen it before. And they're like, no, there's a definite picture that emerges here. But until you see it, you can't see it. Right? So esoteric philosophy is exactly like that. You're dealing with all these different pieces of the puzzle that actually fit together and create this huge, gigantic picture that pops out in 3D. And it unlocks so many different understandings of how the universe really works, how everything just fits together. All right. I'm going to stop talking about that now because I want to get this chapter, but I just thought that was needed to kind of preface this with that. But let's get going here. Okay, so we've got chapter 16 of An Esoteric Cosmology, Earthquakes, Volcanoes, and Human Will. In a preceding lecture, we went back in human evolution to the time when the division of the sexes occurred. Real quick, we're talking about Genesis here. We're talking about anthropogenesis, not cosmogenesis. He's talking about when the division of the sexes occurred. Now, in Genesis, you'll hear that God made them male and female, right? Female and male made he, they, or something along those lines. Well, yes, humans didn't always appear the way they do now. We were not always split into two sexes. The human race was not always split into two sexes. We were very, I don't know what the word is. We're very plant-like in that aspect where we could, we had both functions within us at one point in time. We were both male and female at one time. And Genesis perfectly describes this too, by the way. And we'll end up getting into that at some point. I'll give a reading of the true understanding of what Genesis meant as handed down by the legit stream of the esoteric orders. Because what you get in regular church service, they just don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it's quite simply put, they don't know what they're talking about. So that harkens back to the male and female made he, they. That's when the human organism was a double-sexed being. And then through evolution, we split. And now we've, just like everything has split. You got your male and female, day and night. All this equilibrium that happened is a product of cosmological evolution and human evolution evolving side by side right along. In fact, we reflect in our humanity exactly what the cosmos did. And the certain time periods that it happened in the cosmos, it happened within humanity as well. So, just interesting to note that this moment is in itself the climax of a long cosmic preparation. I'm just going to read the entire thing again. In a preceding lecture, we went back in human evolution to the time when the division of the sexes occurred. This moment is in itself the climax of a long cosmic preparation. After the night which separated the phase of the ancient moon from the terrestrial phase, the earth to begin with appeared combined with the forces of the present sun and moon. They formed but one body, which little by little became differentiated, thus giving birth to the three bodies as we know them now. The present division of the sexes is the result of the separation between the moon forces and the earthly forces. The feminine forces of reproduction have remained under the influence of the moon. The moon still rules over the forces of propagation both in man and animal. Thus, occult knowledge reveals the forces that are at play in the planetary system. And as we know, the moon has an effect on the tides. It also has an effect on a woman's menstrual cycle, right? They're intimately bound up. For those who say that, this is astrology gets a bad name, but it's the planetary bodies have an effect on us. We are intimately bound up with this entire solar system. Okay, but they make it sound stupid when they give these modern understandings of what astrology is. Okay. Yeah, and in a way, I think they do that on purpose so people don't actually find the truth about this information. Okay, let's continue. The present division of the sexes is the result of the separation between the moon forces and the earthly forces. The feminine forces of reproduction have remained under the influence of the moon. The moon still rules over the forces of propagation both in man and animal. Thus, occult knowledge reveals the forces that are at play in the planetary system. At this time, when the sun was still united with both the earth and the moon, neither plants nor animal nor human beings existed as we know them today. In fact, only a plant kingdom existed then, but under totally different conditions from our own. This kingdom preserved a particular connection with the forces of the sun, similar to that of the animal with the moon, and of man with earth. As long as the sun was united with the earth-moon, the plants directed their blossoms toward the center of the globe. When the sun separated off, they oriented themselves in accordance with it and directed their flowers heavenward. And if you've ever noticed plants, obviously they stretch toward the sun. They still have that affinity with the sun. Now, when the sun, earth, and moon were all bound up into one ball when planetary evolution was happening, the plants grew inward toward the earth, because that's where the sun forces came from. Okay? We have seen in an earlier lecture, Lecture 11, that the plants have thus adopted an inverted position in relation to man. Both manifest themselves in the vertical, whereas the animal is found to be halfway between the human orientation and that of the plant world. The spinal column of the animal is in the horizontal. It is by means of the gradual separation of the three heavenly bodies that the different kingdoms on earth have become as we know them. The plant kingdom at the time of the separation of the sun, the animal when the separation of the moon occurred, the pristine composition of these forces contained in germ what was later to take on physical manifestation. Let us imagine a substance which is heated to a high temperature and then cooled. One would then see the various elements which it contains taking on form. And I don't know. I hate to keep interjecting here, but it's interesting what he mentioned about the animal having a horizontal spine, humans having an upright spine. And in another lecture, Steiner goes into the esoteric symbolism of the cross. And what you have is the bottom leg of the cross, like the part you'd plant into the ground if you were to do so, is that little bottom leg before you get to the crossbar. That stands for the plant kingdom. The cross is a symbol which memorializes this process of evolution. So the bottom leg of the cross is the plant kingdom. Then you've got the animal kingdom, which is the crossbar. That's symbolized by the horizontal spine of the animal, right? You've got your mineral kingdom, which is where you plant the cross into. Then you've got your plant kingdom, which is that bottom leg of the cross. Then you've got your animal kingdom, which is the cross member of the cross, which represents the horizontal spine of animal. And then at the top part of the cross, the little part where the head would be, that represents the human kingdom. So you've got all your kingdoms memorialized there within the cross. And if you really stop and think about that, and as you study this, meditate on those things and just kind of let your mind process it all, different epiphanies will come to you. It's amazing stuff. Okay. So, let's get back to it here. At the time of the ancient moon, we also find the solar forces, which during a certain period are concentrated in a celestial body outside the moon. The moon was revolving around the ancient sun, but in such a manner that it always turned the same side to the sun. The orbit of the moon around the earth is a continuation of the motion formerly described around the ancient sun. These bodies, both at the beginnings and at the end of this cosmic period, became one. Just as the earth, the moon, and the sun were united at the beginning of earth evolution and will again be united at the end. These two ancient cosmic bodies would never have been able to achieve in evolution had they not recast their forces after their separation. The moon, during the time it was separated from the sun, developed in such a way that forces were engendered which later made it possible for a third body to appear. In fact, it was during this separation that man was able to develop within himself what later took on physical embodiment and gave him the possibility of developing objective, waking consciousness on Earth. The period which preceded the lunar one is referred to as the solar. At this time of evolution, everything was pure solar life. Occultism sees the sun as a fixed star, which had previously been a planet, and similarly, it recognizes the Earth as a planet destined to become the sun of a future cosmic system. During the solar period, Man was only endowed with a consciousness akin to that of dreamless sleep. Yet another state preceded the solar period. At that time, the sun was not even a planet. The human being was only endowed with a deep trance consciousness or deep sleep. He was not yet the being of light, which he would become on the ancient sun. He simply vibrated like a tone in the pure harmony of this Saturn period. But it should be noted that our present Saturn has nothing to do with this condition. After our earthly period of clear physical consciousness, a fifth condition will dawn of conscious astral imagination during a period known as Jupiter. This will be followed by a period of Venus, where we shall become conscious of what today is the unconsciousness of sleep. Finally, a period of Vulcan will come into being, which corresponds to the highest state of consciousness which can be attained by an initiate. But this does not exhaust the relationships of the Earth and the planets. We in fact can divide our present terrestrial stage into two parts. During the first, it came about that our blood is red. What has given us our red blood? During the separation of the Earth and the Sun, this globe composed of fluid substance was shot through by other fluid forces emanating from the planet Mars. Before this passage of Mars, not the slightest trace of iron existed on this Earth. In fact, that is a result of this passage. All substances containing iron, such as our blood, have been subjected to the influence of Mars. Mars has colored the substance of the Earth, and the appearance of red blood is the result of its influence. That is why the first half of Earth evolution is referred to as the period of Mars. Now, I know that many of you are familiar with the concept that Venus is called Lucifer, especially in the, I believe, back in the Roman period. Lucifer was the name given to Venus, but prior to that, Lucifer was actually represented by Mars. Okay, so that's one thing we've got to remember. These terms and symbols have been kind of manipulated and shuffled around for various reasons over time, but the original Lucifer was actually the Mars influence, okay? And that gives us our lifeblood, gave us iron in our blood. And if you study alchemy, you know that the metal of Mars is iron, and Mars is considered the red planet, right? So all these things have a meaning to them. We'll get deeper into that as we proceed. At that time, iron was a fluid substance, and the metals only hardened later on. Mercury is the only metal which has not solidified. When this will have happened, the soul of man will become totally independent of the physical body, and astral imaginative vision will have become conscious. This fact is connected with the forces of Mercury, which influence the second part of Earth evolution, during which they will densify and finally become solid. The Earth is both Mars and Mercury, and it is this which initiates have woven into our language by indicating that the days of the week belong to the planets of our evolution. Mars and Mercury are placed between the Moon and Jupiter. A little interjection here once again, since he brought it up, is that this stuff is memorialized all around us, and we don't even understand what is around us. They never even teach you this in school, at least they didn't me. But the days of the week, the 7 days of the week, are memorialized after our 7 planets. That's why you have the obvious one, Sunday, the day of the sun. Monday is Moon Day, the day of the moon. Monday, let's see, Tuesday, the god Tuez is why we call this Tuesday. Tuesday is, let's see, what does it go? It goes, well, obviously Saturn. Saturn is Saturday. Sunday is the sun. Tuesday is Mars, the ancient god Tuez. Wednesday is Woden's Day. That's where we get our name for Wednesday. Woden, the ancient god Woden. Thursday is actually Thor's Day. If you go and look this up, the ancient god Thor that we all know from all the movies. And Friday was Freya, the goddess Freya, Venus. That's Venus Day. Thor's Day is Jupiter. Thor is Jupiter, or Zeus. And then, like I said, Friday, Freya, which is Venus. That was the name for Venus back in the day. And then Saturday, Saturn, the old man with a beard and white hair. Saturn's Day. Saturn's Day. That's where we get our conceptualization of the old man who sits on the throne with white hair and a beard. Interesting, right? Saturn's Day. Kinda looks like a guy named Santa Claus, doesn't he? Well, that's not any, there's no coincidence there, and we will eventually cover all that as well. The interior of the Earth. Physical science, as yet, only knows of the terrestrial crust, a mineral layer, which in fact is only like the skin at the surface of the Earth. In reality, the Earth consists of a succession of concentric layers, which we shall now describe. 1. The mineral layer contains all the metals which are found in the physical bodies of everything that lives on the surface. This crust is formed like a skin around the living being of the Earth. It is only a few miles in depth. 2. The second layer can only be understood if we envisage a substance which is the very opposite of what we know. It is a negative life, the opposite of life. All life is extinguished there. Were a plant or an animal plunged into it, it would be destroyed immediately. It would be totally dissolved. This second shell, half liquid, which envelops the earth, is truly a sphere of death. 3. The third layer is a circle of inverted consciousness. All sorrow appears there as joy, and all joy is experienced as sorrow. Its substance, composed of vapors, is related to our feelings in the same negative manner as the second layer is in regard to life. If we now abstract these three layers by means of our thinking, we would then find the earth in the condition in which it was before the separation of the moon. If one is able, by means of concentration, to attain a conscious astral vision, one would then see the activities in these two layers, the destruction of life in the second and the transformation of feelings in the third. 4. The fourth layer is known as water earth, soul earth, or form earth. It is endowed with a remarkable property. Let us imagine a cube, and now picture it reversed inasmuch as its substance is concerned. Where there was substance, there is now nothing. The space occupied by the cube would now be empty, while its substance, in substantial form, would now be spread around it. Hence the term earth of form. Here, this whirlwind of forms, instead of being a negative emptiness, becomes a positive substance. 5. This layer is known as the earth of growth. It contains the archetypal source of all terrestrial life. Its substance consists of burgeoning, teeming energies. 6. This fire earth is composed of pure will, of elemental vital forces, of constant movement, shot through by impulses and passions, truly a reservoir of will forces. If one were to exert pressure on this substance, it would resist. If now, again in thought, one were to abstract these last three layers just described, one would arrive at the condition in which our globe was when sun, moon, and earth were still interwoven. The following layers are only accessible to a conscious observation which is not only that of dreamless sleep, but a conscious condition in deep sleep. 7. This layer is the mirror of the earth. It is similar to a prism which decomposes everything that is reflected in it and brings to expression its complementary aspect. Seen through an emerald, it would appear red. 8. In this layer, everything appears fragmented and reproduced to infinity. If one takes a plant or a crystal and one concentrates on this layer, the plant or the crystal would appear multiplied indefinitely. 9. This last layer is composed of a substance endowed with moral action, but this morality is the opposite of the one that is to be elaborated on the earth. In essence, its inherent force is one of separation, of discord, and of hate. It is here in the hell of Dante that we find Cain, the fratricide. This substance is the opposite of everything which among human beings is good and worthy. The activity of humanity in order to establish brotherhood on the earth diminishes the power of this sphere. It is the power of love which will transform it inasmuch as it will spiritualize the very body of the earth. This 9th layer represents the substantial origin of what appears on earth as black magic, that is, a magic founded on egoism. See diagram. Now, before we scroll down to the diagram, if anybody has read the Temple Legend, or if you're just familiar with the original Temple Legend, see there's a book by Steiner called The Temple Legend where he really elucidates a lot of this very intricate material. But there's also just the Temple Legend. It's told within Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. There's a shortened version of it. And the 9th sphere is the sphere which, I'm just going from memory right now, so I'm going to try to remember this. I think Tubal Cain jumps into, Hiram Abiff jumps into, he's trying to cast the molten sea. Now, I don't want to get too into this right now. I'll end up taking up a lot of time. But he's trying to balance the two forces, the Luciferic stream and the Jehovan stream. The stream of intellectual consciousness with that of intuitive, imaginative consciousness. He's trying to meld both of them. And how he does this in the myth, he's casting the molten sea. That's what it's called when you balance these two forces. He's trying to cast the molten sea at Solomon's temple. Now, when he does this, he gets a vision of Cain, from Cain and Abel. Cain slew Abel, right? There's a whole backstory behind that, and there's deeper esoteric understandings to that story. But what Hiram does is he jumps to the middle of the earth, the 9th sphere. And the number 9 is the number of initiation, right? So Cain tells Hiram, that in so many words, proceed on with the task. This evolution will eventually happen if you're headstrong about it and you keep pushing on and you stay moral. Then you will transmute that intellectual consciousness into love. So you will use your intellect for good. You'll have a balancing of the heart and mind consciousness, which are, also can be represented by the Luciferic and the Jehovan ideas. See, these are the same types of ideas. All right. These various layers are connected by means of rays which unite the center of the earth with its surface. Underneath the solid earth, there are a large number of subterranean spaces which communicate to the 6th layer, that of fire. This element of the fire earth is intimately connected with the human will. It is this element which has produced the tremendous eruptions that brought the Lemurian epoch to an end. At that time, the forces which nourish the human will went through a trial which unleashed the fire catastrophe that destroyed the Lemurian continent. In the course of evolution, the sixth layer receded more and more toward the center as a result of volcanic eruptions, and as a result of volcanic eruptions, became less frequent. And yet, they are still produced as a result of the human will, which, when it is evil and chaotic, magnetically acts on this layer and disrupts it. Nevertheless, when the human will is devoid of egoism, it is able to appease this fire. Materialistic periods are mostly accompanied and followed by natural cataclysms, earthquakes, etc. Growing powers of evolution are the only alchemy capable of transforming, little by little, the organism and the soul of the earth. The following is an example of the relationship that exists between the human will and telluric cataclysms. In human beings who perish as a result of earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, one notices, during their next incarnation, inner qualities which are quite different. They bring from birth great spiritual predispositions because, through their death, they were brought in touch with forces which showed them the true nature of reality and the illusion of material life. One has also noticed a relationship between certain births and seismic and volcanic catastrophes. During such catastrophes, materialistic souls incarnate, drawn sympathetically by volcanic phenomena, by the convulsions of the evil soul of the earth, and these births can in their turn bring about new cataclysms because reciprocally the evil souls exert an exciting influence on the terrestrial fire. The evolution of our planet is intimately connected with the evolution of the forces of humanity and civilizations. Had my alarm go off there. I apologize for that. Okay, now we'll scroll down to this diagram. It'll kind of show you like the different layers of the earth, so you can take away some of the philosophy that's been laid out there. And there we got the interior of the earth. Okay, 1, mineral crust. 2, negative life. 3, inverted consciousness. 4, circle of forms. 5, circle of growth. 6, circle of fire. 7, circle of decomposition. 8, circle of fragmentation. And 9, egocentric egoism. And 9 is the center of the earth. So when you go back to the myth of, say Dante's Inferno, or, like I said, the molten sea, which was supposed to be cast by Hiram, and he jumps to the center of the earth to talk to Cain. See, all these things are interwoven. And Cain instructs him how to transmute that egoic part of himself and how to balance the two streams of consciousness. All right, we're going on 38 minutes. I think that was my longest one yet. I apologize, guys. I like to try to keep these short, but I kind of got on a little ramble there. I've got another thing I'm considering uploading because it's just kind of a voice notes thing that I did on my voice notes recorder, because eventually I want to write a book and I'm just trying to get my ideas down. But I got a little rant on there that I think, some of you might enjoy. It might bring some things to mind. So I'm considering uploading that later. I will not promise it though, because I've been sidetracked the last couple times. But anyway, that's it, guys. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, do all that. Anything you want to bring up, go ahead and throw it down in the comment section. I'm usually pretty good at keeping up on those. So, all right, everybody, take it easy. That's it, and we'll be done with this book pretty soon, and then we will get going on another one. But all right, everybody, take care, and we will talk to you later.